Alright, Chapter 1, Life Changing, The Luckiest Man Alive. I could see the ground coming up frighteningly fast. I knew it was going to be a very hard landing. Feet together, knees bent, tried to absorb the impact. It was the 5th of June 2021. The drop zones had been shut for a while due to the COVID. And you cannot social distance when you're all crammed into a small jump plane. So this was my first jump back in about 10 months. I had to be first out and do a solo jump from 15,000 feet. I was a long way from the drop zone. As I approached the drop zone, I noticed that the wind direction had shifted from a tailwind to the right hand side. And I was planning to do a left-hand landing pattern, which is a rule on the drop zone, which meant I had to do a 270-degree left-hand turn instead of a 90-degree right-hand turn. I didn't have much altitude left, and it's easy to say now that I should have landed in the field before, but I'd never missed the drop zone at Black Knights, and I thought I could make it. I was wrong. The first part of my left-hand pattern headed me downwind, which reduced my airspeed and lift, and I was already dropping faster in the turn. The left side of my canopy seemed to fold inwards, and I raised both my toddles, hoping to get a straight and level canopy which would create lift, but it was too late. That didn't work. I just spiralled me down into the ground. On impact, both my heels hit my buttocks with such force that I felt more pain than I'd ever experienced. I'm no stranger to broken bones, usually from motorcycle crashes, and I knew this had been a lot more serious. I was crumpled upon the ground with both my arms and legs in front of me and my face sideways on the floor between my legs. That's an impossible position for me, and I could not move at all. I know that the worst heavy impact injuries come from extremely high G-forces, can cause multiple fractures, and often are fatal, usually from the rupturing of the main arterial feed from the heart to the internal organs and the brain. Death comes within seconds. Miraculously, this did not happen to me, and I was aware of the real possibility of internal bleeding due to my metallic mitral valve. I take warfarin, blood anticoagulants. Two other skydivers had landed nearby, and the drop zone controller came over on his quad bike whilst phoning for an ambulance. The chief club instructor, Paul, and his wife Sharon, who was a nurse, also came, and the first aid crew arrived. I couldn't move or see because the canopy was over my head, but we were talking. They decided not to move me as I was conscious and talking. I think they were monitoring my blood pressure and pulse. I heard someone say, "We're losing him." The helicopter was called and arrived within minutes. The paramedics were wonderfully considering my extreme situation. I was given all sorts of injections, and it took them a long time to stabilise me before they could cut off my rig, harness and jumpsuit and clothes. During this time I had some very strange experiences. I saw really bright, vivid colours, and I could hear deep and powerful sounds like an electronic synthesizer. I could hear voices. One of them was Sharon's. I said, "It's good to hear your voice." At one point, all the pain just went, and I said, "Wow, I've not felt this good in years." No idea what they gave me, but it certainly helped. I have no idea where I was, but strangely I knew I'd been there before. And what was even stranger, I knew what sounds I was going to hear next. I could accurately predict all the sounds and words a moment before I heard them. I had been here before, and I was experiencing all the same things again. I was conscious all the time, but I couldn't explain it. I thought this is what it must be like to die. I really thought I was dying, and I felt okay with it. I was ready. Then I remember being fastened onto the stretcher and being loaded into the helicopter. where it felt comfortable and warm. Chapter 2. We are sailing. Oh, I've just remembered a TV documentary I watched a few years ago, interviewing centurions about their lives and why they thought they had lived so long. I always thought I had the feeling I was going to live to be over 100. One old man interviewed said, "If I knew I was going to live this long, I'd have taken more care of myself when I was younger." Not that I think I've got much chance of reaching his grand old age now, considering all my existing circumstances, and throughout my lifetime I've certainly had my money's worth from the NHS. In fact, I sometimes wonder if I could work out all the actual costs. Just the helicopter emergency call out costs thousands of pounds per flight. I started thinking and recalling some of my experiences during my hospital stay in June, July, August and September 21, recovering from my life-changing injuries. Some people who have been involved in a serious accident have no recollection of anything, but I was conscious and alert throughout the whole experience. I remember exactly what happened and why it happened. At junior school, we were each given a small diary. I was 13 years old, and I painstakingly kept that diary up to date every day. At the year end, I looked back at what I'd written, and it fascinated me to read about all the things I'd forgotten about. So from then on, I bought my own personal diary every year, and it's been a valuable tool. I recorded everything I did, my achievements, holidays, hobbies, and when I started work at 16 years of age, I was expected to keep a diary for my work tasks, arrangements, meetings, etc. When I started my own business, I continued the habit. Everything was recorded in my diaries for the next 54 years. I can use them to recall where I was and what I did in every single day of my life since I was 13. That's helped me to write this autobiography. One of my first adventures was sailing. In my early years, Dad said he would like to sail around the world. The wind is free. You don't need fuel, just harness the power of the wind. In 1967, Sir Francis Chichester had just completed the first solo sail non-stop round the world. So I went with Mum and Dad on a 1-week learning to sail holiday on the Norfolk Broads, sailing our own hired yacht. Of course, we didn't actually go out to sea, but there's plenty of big lakes in the Norfolk Broad. Mum went on a dinghy sailing course at Holyhead Harbour, Anglesey, and she passed, capsize it and do all sorts of exercises. Then, while she was in Holyhead, she noticed the Ocean Youth Club and the Taiku yacht, where young people under 21 can experience sailing on the ocean. On an ocean-going ketch and learn about sailing, I joined the Ocean Youth Club and went on various sailing trips on the Taiku, a 72-foot, two-masted, 15-berth ketch, from Holyhead Harbour, round Anglesey, through the Menai Straits. Another sail was over to the Isle of Man, another one was across to Ireland and back. When I gained some experience, after a couple of years, I went on a 6-week sailing trip. It was an adventure, planned to go around France and Spain, down the coast of Africa, out to the Azores and the Canary Islands. We set off in a very choppy Irish sea, heading south, tacking directly into wind, going slow. We spent the first night sheltering the storm near Cork in Southern Ireland. We hadn't made much progress. We dropped the anchor. We didn't go aboard land. The next day was worse, with the waves were easily 15 foot high and spaced just the same as the length of the boat, 72 feet. So each time we went over the crest of a wave and raised up, then the hull came down and slammed into the next wave with a right crash. I thought the hull was going to split open. I was so seasick I went down to the toilet, and as soon as I was below deck, I felt much worse. I retched up the contents of my stomach. It was just brown water, exactly the same as what I peed in the toilet. So it was going right through me. The next day we set off toward the Bay of Biscay from Brest in France, heading for Spain. Progress was slow. It was still a storm. As we were tacking into the wind all the time, I was seasick. Our crew consisted of Fred, the experienced skipper, 2 first mates, plus 12 young and experienced sailors. We were split into port watch and starboard watch, sailing non-stop day and night, 4 hours on and 4 hours off. For 10 days, in a force 10 storm, while crossing the Bay of Biscay. I was very ill. It was exhausting as I couldn't keep any food down, but I was starving, and we were 300 miles from land and I just wanted to get off. It was the worst experience I'd had in my life up to that point, worse than any of my broken bones through motorbike crashes. Everyone was sick except the captain. One poor girl spent the worst part in the captain's bunk, which is at the meta centre of the boat, where it is less susceptible to rolling, yawing and rocking. Whilst it was our watch, we were on deck wearing full waterproofs, safely harnessed up with 2 ropes and clips, so when you wanted to move round the deck, you clipped the one clip on the forward and undid the clip at the back, so you permanently clipped on at all times to prevent man overboard. Both sails were fully reefed in. The main sail was close hauled to port, and the jib was winched into starboard, which keeps the bow heading into wind. The sea wasn't like waves I'd ever seen. It consisted of random mountains of water and hollows. The mountains were just about the height of the 72-foot mast, and we seemed to be bobbing about halfway between the peaks and the troughs. Every few seconds we were near the top, and then the mountain would drop and the drops would turn into mountains. This happened so fast that vast amounts of seawater were left in the air, which the force 10 storm blew sideways and hit us like the most powerful rainstorm I'd ever experienced. It had taken us 10 days to reach the next port, Corunna, in the northwest tip of Spain. We were well behind schedule. I couldn't wait to get off onto dry land, and I wasn't getting back on that boat for anything. Corunna was an industrial city on the northern coast of Spain, not a tourist resort. I couldn't find anybody who could speak a word of English. The first mate on the Taiku told me there was a ferry called the Patricia, which left from Bilbao 150 miles away along the coast, and it went to Southampton in England. So that was my plan, to get home. Sounds easy? I said goodbye to my fellow shipmates and went. I had developed sea legs whilst I was on the boat, and I was wobbling all over the place while walking on dry land, like a drunk. I didn't have much money, and all my kit was in plastic bin liner bags. I hadn't washed or shaved in 10 days, and I was starving. I must have looked like a drunken tramp. I found the central railway station and looked at the railway map on the wall, showing where Bilbao was. The route was 150 miles away, so with pen and paper I drew a copy of the map and made a note of the names of the stations so I'd know where to get off eventually. Then I went to the ticket office and pointed to my map and said I wanted to buy a ticket to go to Bilbao, but the ticket master gibbered at me in Spanish and he wouldn't sell me a ticket. I couldn't understand a word he was saying. So I went out into the main street I could see if I could find anyone who could speak English. Eventually, I found someone who was very helpful. He inquired at the ticket office and told me it was only a goods line and that I couldn't buy a ticket. So I had to catch the bus to Bilbao. He then took me to the bus station and showed me which was the right bus to get on. The fare was only £10 and it travelled all day, arriving at Bilbao centre at midnight. I had no idea where the docks were, so I had to get in a taxi and I told the driver, "Ferry Patricia." The driver took me downhill, which I'd expect to go to the sea. But then we started going uphill and downhill, and the taxi fare just for a few miles was more than the bus fare had been for 150 miles. He dropped me off at the deserted dock in pitch dark. There was one street lamp down, and beneath it was a billboard for the Patricia. It was 3 days away to Southampton, from Southampton, and it had just left. So I went to find a cheap motel room. There were plenty of signs saying accommodation. I knocked on many doors, but they all took one look at me and said, "No, we're full up." So I spent the rest of the night on a very uncomfortable park bench. It was not long before daylight, and I'd not eaten in 10 days. So I was starving, and there was no fast food places like there are places today. The only places I could see to eat something were the small Spanish bars, which all had plates of nibbles, tapas and peanuts for the customers. They were all busy and full of dock workers, so I just sneaked in and helped myself a handful of nuts. And without anyone noticing, then I found a small supermarket and bought a stick of bread, a large block of cheese and a bottle of orange juice. This next night I found a deserted building with no window frames in it, so I climbed in and slept on the ground floor in the corner of a room. The next day I walked down to the docks where the Patricia was due, and there was a queue of cars and people. A small cafe was full of people eating, so I went in. I pointed to someone with a plate of steak, chips and peas, indicating that I wanted the same. They served me the best meal I'd had in 2 weeks. I sat down to eat. The only space available was next to a man, and we talked. He must have thought I was a tramp, but as we got to know each other, he offered me a seat in his car as a foot passenger. The fare was included for foot passengers, and so I got a free ride on the Patricia ferry. Lucky. Stan was a ship's captain. He was going home to London for his son's 18th birthday. He was going to buy his son a car, and he showed me a wad of £20 notes in his top shirt pocket. I'd never seen so much cash. I guess a ship's captain must earn a good wage. The storm in the Bay of Biscay was still pretty rough, and on the Patricia there were lots of people being seasick over the side, but to me it felt like a mill pond. Although the propellers were coming out of the water between the waves, I had actually enjoyed the sail back. We had a comfy cabin, a restaurant, and an entertainment dance hall, where there was a full-size concert grand piano. It was deserted because almost everyone was sick. Playing classical piano had been my passion of mine since I was 10 years old. I still play today. My teacher said I was a natural, so it was a pleasure to sit down and recite my favourite classical pieces. At 13 years of age, I learnt Beethoven's Fur Elise, and I still play it today, but Chopin is my favourite. The first piano I saw was in St. Paul's Church Institute's building. When I was at infant school, we went there for our dinners whilst at primary school. It was a big church hall, and for some reason we kids were all left unsupervised, and some of the mischievous ones were mucking about. One had started banging on the keyboards of a piano, making loud discords. I was fascinated by it. Then, as he wanted to make more noise, he climbed up and started jumping up and down on the keys, like a monkey. I was intrigued by the piano, but disapproving of his monkey-like behaviour. So, when Mum and Dad asked me what I wanted for my 10th birthday, I asked for a piano. They said I would have to take lessons, and it turned out that I was something of a natural. I took all my exams, and when I was 13 I played at the school concert in front of an audience of 2,000 people. Everyone was amazed. But then I stopped playing at 15. I still play at home, occasionally. When I was about 30, I had my leg in a plaster cast for 13 weeks and off work, so I started learning all my old piano pieces again. I took the opportunity to learn all my favourite pieces and some new ones. I played on and off for years until my 50s, when I decided to start taking lessons again. I did all my grades again and played a monthly concert at a big church in Rochdale on a 12-foot size concert grand piano. It was a pleasure to play. The acoustics in the church were fantastic. It was a real pleasure. This was a monthly concert so that students could hone their skills in front of a packed audience. The church charged £5 a head, which included a cup of tea with pie and peas, and all the audience were very appreciative of the performances. I was bringing a classic piece up to concert standard every month. This was the pinnacle of my piano skills. I have let it slip again since then. But now that I'm home since the parachute accident, I've been trying to start to play again. Anyway, where was I? Oh yes, on the Patricia at Southampton. So I was a foot passenger, courtesy of Stan, the sea captain. He offered me a lift to London in his car when I went on the Underground to Victoria bus station, but when I got my bag to buy a ticket, I realised I'd left my passport in Stan's car. So I dashed back on the Underground to the car, and my passport was still there on the dash. Stan luckily gave me my passport. The coach fare from Victoria to Charlton Street in Manchester was £3.18. Then I got the number 24 bus, which was my usual route home from Manchester Town Hall, from Stevenson Square. So I was walking home from the bus stop in Royton up to Thorpe, still carrying my gear in black plastic bin liners and looking a bit rugged, when my mum came round the corner in the car. She was very surprised to see me. She thought I was still sailing round the Canaries. She had no idea of the ordeal I'd been through, and wasn't expecting me home for a month. There was no such things as mobile phones then, and most people didn't even have telephones. They had to use a public phone box or even write a letter. I found some photos in the attic of this sailing trip. We each took turns at the helm, and I climbed to the top of the mast, 72 foot high, when it was in dry dock, so I was about 100 feet above the mud. And there's some photographs in my autobiography.